What is going on, everybody? Sunday afternoon, enjoying a cigar, which my brother and a friend from church got me into. Another friend was making fun of me saying, "You're the DIY king, why haven't you made yourself a humidor?" when I brought out my store-bought humidor to him. So in this video, we're going to fix that and make this beautiful humidor out of maple, but it's got a hex overlay that we did on the CNC. It turned out pretty sweet. I'm going to be making this humidor out of a very beautiful wide piece of maple that I've had acclimating in the shop for quite some time. Not specifically for this project, just out of the stock that I have had. Now, maple is not the most exciting looking species of wood, but it is very easy to work with, and I have a plan to doll it up by using the CNC to put a hexagon kind of honeycomb pattern on the wood. Now, I have a gigantic table build going on right in the middle of this project, and I've had to kind of move it around a bunch of times, so I got super lucky there that I had the perfect amount of space to be able to break things down on the bandsaw before moving over to the jointer so I can make single passes. I always like to do cup down on the jointer. I don't know about you guys, let me know down in the comments down below, but I feel like this prevents rocking and then makes it so I need to remove less material. We're going to mill up two sides on the jointer like we typically do, and then move over to the planer to get down close to our final thickness, and I'll tell you why I like to do that in just a second. It has been overnight. Yesterday we milled everything close to our final thicknesses, and I never like to go down to the final thickness the first time because you've stripped off a whole bunch of material. There's a good chance there's some moisture that's different than was originally at the edges of the wood, so you want to make sure it's not going to move on you. So I've let these sit overnight. I also like to stand my boards up like this so that you get airflow all the way around the widest portions of the wood, because if you had it like this, you're getting good airflow on this side and these two small sides, and you're probably going to get a little bit of cupping. So I've had some pretty good success standing up like this. But now we're going to go back to the planer, going to get everything down to their final dimensions, and then we got to sit down the CNC because we're going to do a honeycomb pattern on this. I hope it looks all right. What we're going to do is carve a honeycomb pattern into the wood. I think it should look pretty cool. We got the sides to do, and then the front is going to have a blank spot for a hydrometer. We got to get the hole in there. So a couple of steps, and then the back will just be the honeycomb like we see right here. So with that honeycomb, we got to get a V-cut bit. This is a 90-degree V-cut bit that will change out, get our boards in here and let it rip, and then we got to do a second cut with just an 1/8 inch to do the holes for the hydrometer. This thing has not been used in a while. It has been quite a bit of time since I have used the X-Carve from Inventables, and oftentimes I wonder if I should move on and get rid of this tool because I really don't use it. But every so often it comes in so handy, and something like this is just not an option if you don't have a CNC machine like this. I suppose if you had some kind of pattern router, you could do something like this, or I guess you could hand carve it. The CNC really did come in handy for this project. I was able to set the robot on making this hexagon pattern, and I was able to step outside of the shop, keeping a close ear, and work on my son's lawnmower. Once we had all of the hexagons cut on all four sides, and I do want to point out that I did my best to try to make sure that the alignment of these hexagons was in such a way that when I cut the miters of this box, everything lined up, and we'll show you that later on in the video. Once we had all the hexes cut, I did use an 1/8 inch straight bit on the front to cut the hole for the hydrometer and also cut the outside pattern. And I'm glad I did this because it wasn't exactly centered in the board, and I had to use a jointing jig on the table saw to be able to straighten up one side before being able to run the clean side up against my fence. Now over here you can see I'm looking very closely here because I'm looking at that line that we just cut on the CNC and making sure everything is squared up. And here you can see where I had to use a tapering jig actually, and I just use it as kind of like a jointing edge to make sure that we had that first cut nice and square before flipping it around and getting it against the fence of the table saw. I am assembling this box with basic miters, so we're going to throw a 45-degree miter on the Harvey table saw. Make sure we creep up right to that edge because I did cut these down to their final length, so we don't want to take any more material off. And we're going to cut that 45 on the Harvey table saw using the Harvey compass miter gauge. And as you can see later in the video, the 90-degree corners of this box perfectly dead on. So very, very accurate tool. Always a pleasure to use. We want to put this rabbit, dado, whatever, on the bottom. This is going to be on the bottom of the humidor to accept the box. And the way I'm going to do that is using the table saw. I got it set to the proper depth that I want right here. And it's more than the thickness of one blade, and I don't want to stand the piece up on the side. So I just want to make a couple of cuts. So the Harvey Big Eye Rip Fence system has these stop blocks right here. So I'm going to do one cut all the way this way, and I've set up the other one where I can do the other cut all the way that way. Watch. Got an 1/8 inch of bump between the fence right here, and I can repeatedly do the whole rabbit, cut it, move it over, bump it, lock it down, cut it, move it back and forth, and I'll be able to get all the rabbits in my pieces very nicely, consistently, and accurately. Those bump stops are super handy and allowed me to cut these rabbits perfectly accurately, and if I did have to go back, that's where they really come in handy, like if you adjust your fence for a different cut and you need to jump back to it. But perfectly good straight off the table saw, and then we're going to get right to assembling. Not putting an exorbitant amount of glue on here, but making sure I get good coverage. And then I'm using these spring clamps that I got off on Amazon. Link to them down in the description below. If you do any kind of mitering, any kind of boxes like this, frames, picture frames, these things are invaluable and very inexpensive. But like I said, clamped up just with these spring clamps, and this box was perfectly square. And when I mean perfectly, it is dead on, and I'll show you a close-up of me sliding a square on the inside in just a second. Once I got everything glued up, do like to go through and make sure everything is cleaned up because this is a fine little piece of furniture right here. And look at that, perfectly dead 90 degrees. The bottom and the top of this box will be one piece, which the grain of goes the same direction as the side, so I'm hoping that accounts for any movement and we don't get any cracking in this box. I've had good success with this methodology in the past, but you can see here on the bottom, that's inset to that rabbit that we cut, that there is a little bit of an expansion gap on either side that I'm pointing at right here, and then the far edges, which are the long grain, will stay stationary. Now for the top, I'm using a marking knife because pencil doesn't get close enough for what we want right here. To mark out that top, we cut it over on the Harvey table saw, and then this is simply being glued down to the top because we will run the whole box through the table saw to get some of that sides to act as the lid of the box as we move forward with the build. I am putting a 45-degree chamfer on that box because I really thought that the 45 blended in very well with the honeycomb pattern that we had all around the sides of the box. I want to take a quick pause and thank Carolina Shoe, who is the sponsor of today's video. Good friends of mine, been sponsoring the channel for a long time, so we're very thankful when we got a good one for you today. They have something for everybody, whether you need to go hiking. Right down here on my feet, I have the black lightning line, which are dressy enough to wear to work, and they have the toe protection in there if you need that for your job. The Chancellor line right here, I wear pretty much every day in the shop and out around the property. I actually helped build a pavilion for our church in some horrendous conditions, on ladders, in mud, gravel. It was not very fun. Working in that weather anyway, but my feet did not get wet at all when other people were complaining about wet boots, and very comfortable on ladders as well. And then if you got to get real serious, you got some high top boots right there. Up until June 16th, so get something for your dad, get something for yourself from Carolina Shoe. June 16th, use the code Who's Your Daddy. It's not Who's Your Daddy. Dad's Day 20 to save 20% off site-wide. So not any specific boots. If you want to get 2 boots, use the code Dad's Day 20 at the link down in the description below, site-wide at Carolina Shoe to save 20% off. Happy Father's Day, everybody. Like I mentioned while we were doing the CNCing, I tried to line up the honeycomb pattern so that it blended seamlessly around the corner, and we were pretty close, but I used a sharp utility knife to cut out any notches to make sure it blended nice and evenly. Now, make sure you don't ruin this project with sanding. Use fresh sandpaper to prevent the swirl marks, and the Surf Prep soft pad sanders were invaluable for getting all those nooks and crannies that we CNC'd. We're all sanded up. We've spent a lot of time on this humidor so far. Let's cut it up now. Slightly terrifying, but gotta make the lid out of this. So making sure we're snug to the fence. Gonna cut it at just under 1 inch from the top, and it'll put us right in the middle of one of the hexes. And this was absolutely terrifying. Could have ruined the whole project right here. The cut actually wasn't perfect, but it was pretty close, and I was able to tape down some big sheets of sandpaper, which I don't know the last time was I ever used these. I'm surprised I still have them, and was able to sand the whole box flat, the top and the bottom, against that sandpaper, and in the end, we had a perfect fit. Yes, I'm going to stain this, even though it is beautiful soft maple here with a little bit of spalting in there, but I wanted to try to use a penetrating oil-based stain to try to get the lines between all the hexes to be darker. It didn't really work out exactly like I wanted, but I do got to say this Minwax stain that I used did turn out very nice. It's a beautiful finish, and then we will be spraying, after a proper cure time, waterborne finishes on top of this oil-based stain. As long as it's cured, there is no problem with mixing the two. Before we go to the finish, I am going to add some glue and put like an inner lid box rim lines. I don't know what you call it. It's like a little bit of strips on the inside of the lid so that we get a nice, snug, humidity locking fit of the top of this humidor. You see this in store-bought versions, and I thought it was a good idea to make sure we got a good fit. Like I mentioned, my tried and true, we're doing general finishes, sanding sealer with Enduro Clear semi-gloss finish on the top. I did like 6 or 7 coats of the Enduro on the top just so we had a very, very thick, very, very gloss, almost wet looking finish, and it did turn out awesome. Now, these hinges were a total pain in the neck. It takes a couple seconds in the video here, but I spent hours trying to get these finicky little things to work out correctly. I have what's called a jigget system from Rockler, which should make it very easy to use a router to cut the mortices for these hinges, and it worked out pretty well. But remember those strips for the lid portion that we added on the top of this box? Definitely don't want to put those on until getting the mortices cut in the future, because it really messed up the alignment, because I had to go on top of those strips, which made the mortices kind of inaccurate and really just a colossal pain in the neck. Also have to drill a hole for the catch, which holds the lid open, and that was also tricky. In the future, I would go with a wider boards for the size of the humidor, which would make it a little bit heavier but much easier to drill and prepare for these hinges. Like I said, few seconds in the video, but a colossal pain in the neck to make sure these worked out well. In the end, it did turn out pretty well. Don't know if this is exactly kosher, but I am adding a thin strip of DAP clear silicone in the bottom of the box to make sure we have a good seal. So the bottom and the sides are probably going to move a little bit differently, and just want to make sure we're able to hold humidity in this box. I'm also putting it on the inside of the hydrometer because that didn't look like it would offer a very good seal, and hopefully this silicone sets up well. The hydrometer and the hinges I got from Amazon, links to them down in the description below if you're interested. It's actually a digital hydrometer with the temperature gauge on there as well. It turned out very nice. And on the bottom, I am putting a strip of velvet, so when you put this down on the table or whatever, it slides around nice and smoothly. And we are finished. It did turn out pretty good. I made this tray in there as well. It's just kind of a boring tray, but this should double up or triple up the amount of cigars that you can put in here. I modeled the size of this after something that can hold about 100 cigars. I'm not there yet, but we'll see how many it holds in the future, and hopefully the humidity holds up well in this as well. But I do gotta say, I think it turned out pretty sweet, and I will be showing this off to my friends with no more embarrassment of a store-bought humidor. Well, that is a wrap on the humidor, everybody. Don't mind the humidity on there right now. It is getting acclimated. I got 84% Lovitas in there. We'll let it sit for a couple of weeks and get that up to the proper humidity. I hope you guys enjoyed that video. I sure had fun making that one. Not a very long project, but very nice. And in case you were interested, right now I am smoking the Ave Maria Immaculata right now. Turning out pretty good so far. Let me know down in the comments below your favorite cigars, because I am a novice and I would like to hear what you guys might like. I hope you guys enjoyed that video. If you did, please hammer that thumbs up button, as it helps us out and gets this video in front of more eyes. I'm DIY Tyler, enjoying a cigar on a Sunday afternoon. You guys have a good one.